Hey guys, it's Sandro here, and today's video is a review and comparison of Gyeon's Q2 Pure Evo and Avalon King's Armor Shield 9 ceramic coatings. I'm going to put some info on screen about these two coatings in relation to their cost and the brand's claims, but as always this review will be based around a series of tests to evaluate their performance in areas such as the user experience, looks, feel, hydrophobic behaviour and potential durability. So why these two coatings? Honestly, I've had quite a few requests to review both of them, so I thought I'd kill one bird with two stones and combine them here. And what I'm also going to do is use the older previous version of Gyeon Q2 Pure as a control product, as I've previously reviewed it, liked it, and I know how it performs, so it should provide a good baseline for further comparative information. So no, I don't think these two coatings are necessarily direct competitors, but they are two coatings you guys have requested to review, so let's get to it. The first area of evaluation is the application and user experience, and I'm going to start with the older version of Gyeon Pure as a baseline. As I mentioned in that original video I did on Q2 Pure, Gyeon really pushed quite a specific coating application method of applying the coating to only half the applicator, specifically using circular motions and then working it in a second time with an applicator before wiping or leveling the coating down. Now I personally found and stated in that video that I thought this was unnecessary, as the coating worked just as well for me when applying it with a standard method, though some disagreed with me, which is fine. In any case, the older Q2 Pure had a slightly tacky and thicker consistency and was also a quicker flashing coating that I personally thought was neither super easy or super difficult to apply, but just fine in that area with no real issues. So let's now compare that to the new Gyeon Q2 Pure Evo. The first thing to mention is that Gyeon has done a completely 180 here and basically said you can apply the new Evo any way you like. Circular, horizontal, vertical, overlapping, or just wipe it in as you please, as long as you make sure you have good, even coverage. So what do I think about that? I love it. You can argue that, well, the older version was a different formulation and as such required a very specific application. Maybe, but my own testing suggested otherwise. In any case, I think it's fantastic that Gyeon has pushed the single most important point here, which is that you can use a lot of different techniques to apply coating, but what matters most isn't the specific technique, but rather how well you use it. I think that's honest and does away with pointless and strict processes that in most cases are just overreach. So with that said, how does the new Evo compare? Well, for one thing, it doesn't seem to flash as quick as the previous version, so it does need to sit a little longer, though I wouldn't say it's a slow flashing coating either, just somewhere in between. Secondly, the new Evo doesn't streak or rainbow up as much as the previous version, and as such is a little harder to read for beginners to get the right wipe off timing. Thirdly, I also think it's a touch more grippy or tacky than the older version to level down, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, just something you notice when using the two side by side. All in all, it's a decent user experience. I think the older version was a little easier to read and use, but it's honestly not all that far off. Now Avalon King's Armor Shield by comparison is slicker, thinner, and an easier coating to lay down by comparison. What's also quite interesting is that it has an immediate strong rainbow streaking effect from the get-go, unlike most other coatings that develop that rainbow look after they start flashing. So instead of waiting for this coating to start streaking as a sign it's flashed and ready to be wiped off, Armor Shield is the opposite, and you have to wait until that rainbow streaking starts to fade and lose a little of its intensity as a sign it's ready to be leveled down. So this could be confusing to a first-time user, but quite honestly it's something that was easier to pick up and read, though slightly different. As far as its flashing time goes, it was quite identical to Gyeon Pure Evo, in that it wasn't overly fast or overly slow, but just somewhere in between. The wipe-off itself is easier than the Gyeon coatings with less friction, though time-wise they both took just as long to level down perfectly. All in all, I think Armour Shield has a slightly nicer user experience that most users will have less issues with. After the test panels were given a week to fully cure, the next test was evaluating the ability of these coatings to improve the look of automotive paint. So in this test, I'm looking at things like reflective gloss, saturation, the darkening effect, and the ability of these coatings to fill in compounding haze or minor swirls. Now I changed up the lighting a few times and even took both panels outside for another look under diverse lighting, but the result was always identical in that I couldn't see any obvious or even any subtle differences in the look of these three coatings. In fact, if I didn't know for a fact that these were three different coatings, I would have guessed based on looks that it's the same coating. And this isn't usually the way this test goes. I try and film these videos in a way that also lets you guys judge the results for yourselves. So I'll leave this one up to you, as for me it was a dead heat. What I can say is that having tested the previous Gyeon Q2 Pure and thinking that it was a nice looking coating, would suggest that the new Pure Evo and Armour Shield 9 are also quite good looking coatings. And I could obviously also see on the test panels that all the coatings here have been able to improve gloss, saturation and filling abilities. I just can't honestly say that one necessarily looked better than the other. The next test was assessing the slickness or lack of friction that these coatings create on automotive paint. The main benefit of paint protection products that do leave a slick finish is that it helps avoid washing juice or wiping swirls, allowing your wash pad or cloths to glide over the paint with less friction. Now, although ceramic coatings do tend to create a slicker surface over bare paint, they aren't generally as slick as most paint sealants, waxes or quick detailers. Having said that, I just can't get around how tacky the new Gyeon Pure Evo was in my testing. I struggled to get the bottle to slide much at all, and when I tried, it mostly just dug in, scratched and toppled over. In fact, in all the past tests I've done, I've never seen a coating bottle scratch the surface as much as it did on the Pure Evo section. Now, the previous version of Q2 Pure also wasn't a very slick coating, but it was still passable and on par with some other coatings in that area. And as you can hopefully see in the footage, Armour Shield is actually very good in this area, and I'd say slicker than most ceramic coatings as a whole. Now, this black panel has a soft, Japanese-like clear coat applied to it, while the second grey panel has a harder Euro-style clear coat applied. So I ran a quick test on that harder paint, and Pure Evo did perform a little better there, showing at least some slickness, though still far less than the rest. So maybe this overly tacky finish was partly due to the softer paint and how Evo meshed with it, and I thought this could be some helpful information. So onto some water behaviour testing. Ceramic coatings that display superior hydrophobic qualities such as rapid water sheeting and increased water bead contact angles tend to be quicker and easier to wash and dry, and also aid in self-cleaning abilities. In this test, I introduced various water spray patterns and diverse volumes of water over the panel to assist the coating's ability and behaviour in the area of hydrophobicity. Now, as you guys continue to observe this whole process, what you will see by the end is that we have two coating sections that are in fact displaying impressive water behaviour, both being Gyeon Q2 Pure and the new Pure Evo, while the section with Avalon King's Armour Shield 9 isn't in the same league. Although I wouldn't say Armour Shield is terrible, as it still does sheet the water in a decent manner and create some relatively decent water beads, it would be a lie to say it's impressive here, but I think it's fair and perhaps passable. On the other hand, both Gyeon coatings are quite good here, with super quick sheeting abilities and nice propped up water bead contact angles, completely in line with a highly hydrophobic ceramic coating. Between the older and newer Q2 Pure, it's very close and almost clutching at straws, but I do feel confident in saying that the new Pure Evo is just a fraction more hydrophobic, as it sheets the water ever so slightly quicker, the water beads look just a touch nicer, and it seems to break the water accumulation quicker with better overall surface tension. I wouldn't say it's the most hydrophobic coating I've tested, but there's no denying it's still very good. The final test in this review was a chemical resistance evaluation to predict the potential environmental resistance of these coatings. I used CarPro Multi-X at a 1:2 dilution ratio, firstly lightly treating the panel and then getting more and more aggressive with each subsequent application. Now, fairly quick into this whole chemical resistance test, it did become quite apparent that just like the previous hydrophobic test, Amour Shield just wasn't in the same league as the other two Gyeon coatings. I will say that Amour Shield actually did okay during the first couple of chemical hits, just showing mild reduction in behaviour to start with, but once I went beyond that and started getting more aggressive, it simply just lost its performance to a far greater level than the other two coatings. Between the older and newer Q2 Pure coatings, it was once again extremely close. It took a lot of work to finally start breaking them down, even just a little, which is what you should expect from a highly durable, week-old ceramic coating. They should be very chemical resistant as they were. Now, although I gave up on completely stripping them down, it did become apparent by the end of my testing that the new Pure Evo was holding in there a little better, so I would expect it to last a little longer. Twice as long, I'm not sure, but in any case, I thought both coatings did extremely well here, and the new Evo was a touch better. Now, while you guys have a look at the hydrophobic and chemical testing on the second test panel, in which you should see some very similar results, I'll just wrap up this video with my own personal conclusions. As I mentioned at the start of this video, these two coatings aren't necessarily in direct competition with each other, as Pure Evo costs about 50% more than Amour Shield and also claims up to 3 years durability rather than 2, so I would expect it to perform better. So this was more about just putting these coatings together through some testing to discover more about them. Starting with Amour Shield 9, I think with all things considered, it's a decent ceramic coating. Its strongest points by far are its nice and easy user experience, its great looks and very slick finish, all available at a much lower price point than most other decent ceramic coatings. So there's a great element of value there. Where it does fall a little short in my opinion is in its hydrophobic behaviour and potential durability. Now, I have no doubt that in certain circumstances it could very well last 2 years and beyond, and you could also use it with a more hydrophobic top coat sealant to improve its behaviour and potential durability, or even lay down 2 or 3 layers. But with that aside, I think it could improve in these 2 areas to make it a greater and more rounded ceramic coating as a whole. It's been out for a while, and maybe a version 10 that addresses these 2 areas could take it to the next level. I think Gyeon has done a great overall job with the new Q2 Pure Evo. Although its formula could be a little nicer to apply, it's still decent in that area, and as far as looks go, I'd say quite confidently that it's a generally good looking ceramic coating. I think the only real issue I had with it was its surprisingly grippy finish that's bordering on being acceptable or not, and maybe something the brand just didn't adequately evaluate or comprehensively assess in this new formula. With that said, its hydrophobic behaviour is great, and based on my own testing, I would expect quite good long-term durability. Whether it's really twice as durable as the previous version, I don't know, but I'd say it should last longer in any case. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I was perhaps expecting a little more from the new Pure Evo. Perhaps an easier user experience, better gloss, saturation, slickness, and hydrophobics, and for it to be not so close to the previous version with just some very minor differences. Maybe this is partly due to the previous version already being so good, or me just imposing unjust higher expectations, I'm not sure. I don't think for a moment that any of my reviews or tests are infallible. There's always copious amounts of variables to consider that makes this a difficult and sometimes stressful process. If you don't believe me, try it for yourselves and put that video out there for the world to chime in and sometimes rip apart. It's not always such a fun thing to do, especially when so much work goes into it. But I also understand that these brands put a lot of time, money, resources, and reputations behind these products, so I try to be as respectful, objective, and fair as I possibly can. In the end, I'm not trying to sway you of anything, I'm just sharing my own findings and hope that this information is helpful, whether you agree or disagree with my own conclusions. I think I'll leave it there, guys, and if you enjoyed this video and would like to say thanks and help support future content, you can do so by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ccad, in which I'll have a link to in the description box, and thank you everyone for the support so far. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. Please share it with others, give it a like and comment below to show your support for this content, and I'll see you guys soon.
Mikado